Welcome to the NBAV podcast. Welcome back to NBAV, the NBA Avenue podcast, where we're going to be starting our new series. It's the NBA Summer League series. So we're going to go team by team, focusing on one team each episode. Maybe if there's really not much to talk about with one team, maybe we'll cram two teams into one episode. But we're going to start off with the Boston Celtics. Now, Boston is a team that you think, well, what are you going to see in Summer League? What is even the point? Is anyone from this team going to make the actual Celtics roster? They're competing for a championship. They are the defending NBA champions. But they actually have more than you would think. You'd think that a team that has put all their chips in the middle and offered all of these contracts and extended virtually every player on the team. I mean, they have Jaylen Brown, Tatum, Holiday, Pritchard, Hauser, Derek White, Xavier Tillman. Like, they extended all of these guys. Even Neemias Queta from the G League team, they extended, and he maybe will be on the roster this year, but they extended everybody. Anything that wasn't tied down, they offered an extension to. I think the only guys who they didn't offer an extension to are maybe Porzingis, and that's pretty much it. They really extended everything that wasn't tied down. And then you have a G League team, and you're like, well, what's the point? Is there any chance? Well, look, injuries happen, and you never know how long your team is going to be good for. The Boston Celtics won the finals, and then immediately after they won the finals, they extend all these guys, and then next thing you know, you hear that the ownership wants to sell the team. And then you start to hear things like, well, all of these contracts are going to make it impossible that this nucleus can actually stay together for 3 or 4 years. Now, I don't know if that's true. Maybe they will manage to keep the nucleus together. Maybe they will be competing for the championship, not just this coming season, but the year after that, the year after that, the year after that, maybe for the next 5 years. Who knows? I'm not going to sit here and say that they won't, because I think it's quite possible that they will. I don't think anyone really knows what the deal is with the selling of the team and the rules of keeping players together on the salaries and the tax and this and that. I think it's possible that they'll keep enough together that they'll be competing for the next several seasons. But still, you want to see that something is in the pipeline, because you always want to have the option to insert good players into the lineup, whether that's next year, 2 years, 3 years, whether there are injuries. You always want to have a competitive G League team, because you never know when you're going to need to turn to them. And I'll say I was surprised by what we saw from the G League. Let's just go through the Celtics G League roster. And it's going to go in alphabetical order. So we'll do it alphabetically. We'll talk a bit about the different players, and then we'll rank them, and we'll say who is the most impressive to... We're only going to highlight the ones who are impressive, but we're going to go in order of best, second best. Maybe we'll hit 5 or 6 players who are actually noteworthy and can maybe stand a chance. At this point in time, we think of maybe making an NBA roster one day. So starting alphabetically, they had Tyler Cook. Didn't really show much. He had maybe 1 or 2 good moments throughout the entire Summer League. Really didn't show too much. You had J.D. Davison. Davison, a point guard, scrappy, tough-nosed. There were parts earlier on where he showed a little bit more scoring ability, and I thought, hey, this guy's a little bit like, is he like a little Kemba Walker-y? And then I'm like, nah, he doesn't have really that kind of bag like Kemba does. More so maybe like a Colin Sexton, a downhill guy, a determined guy, gets downhill, gets to the hoop. Good player of at the very least G League caliber, at the very least. Then you have a guy, Tristan Enaruna. I don't know if he played in any of the games. I don't recognize his name. I don't recall hearing his name at all. Then you have Ron Harper, a guy who doesn't really show anything on the defensive end. He's streaky, has some games where it looks like he can score, but probably not enough there in the bag to make it really to the NBA level. Because if you don't have the defense and your offense is inconsistent, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough one for Ron Harper, the 24-year-old. So this was really kind of his last chance. And if he's not going to make an NBA team soon, he's not going to have too much left in the tank. I mean, how many more years do you have? Well, I would say maybe once you're 27, I think that you're not really going to be too wanted on the G League roster. I don't know. I would have to look around the G League and see how many players are 27 and older still playing in the G League, or is that the point where teams kind of say, "Hey, we don't really want you." So this is definitely the hitting sort of the end of Ron Harper's chances. In a year from now, he'll be 25, and it's only gonna get a little bit more dicey if he doesn't start to really show some consistency. Then you have Jalen House, small guy, a guy who could run the G League roster, a guy who could run. He's a classic point guard. He's a guy who can come in and run the team, sort of a streaky Tyler Ulysses, a little bit of scoring ability, a little bit of flash and flair. He's not going to be an NBA player. He's too small, and then doesn't have really an incredible shooting ability to compensate. But he's good. He's a player who, if you have him on your G League roster, you know that you'll be sending out a competitive lineup every single night. He'll be able to get the different guys involved. He'll be able to do the job for your G League team. So as a 6-foot guy, 165 pounds, he's a good guy to have for the G League. Not a guy who's going to make the NBA roster, of course. Then you have Drew Peterson, a little bit scrappy, sort of has like maybe a more hard-nosed Furkan Korkmaz comparison. A guy who's, is kind of long and lanky, skinny, and likes to shoot the three ball. Didn't end up showing as much as he would have needed to do to actually make an impact. And then you have Neemias Queta. So this is a guy who, 7-footer, a center, who's 24, and this is a guy that Boston already went ahead and re-signed and extended, and they feel good about him. They feel like he can make the team. Is he great? I won't say that he's great. I'll say he's good. And really, when you have a center, if you have the hustle and you have the offensive rebounding ability and you can defend the drop, just a drop, a little bit, that's enough in today's NBA. The effort is half the battle. Now, I don't think he showed an offensive game of a guy, let's say, like Isaiah Hartenstein, or a guy who has like real scoring ability, like some of the better centers, but he, at the very least, will be a bench center in the league. There's no reason for him not to be. And I think that's what Boston Celtics fans are excited about, because they had a guy, Rob Williams, who ended up being too injury prone, and he's not on the team anymore. He ended up going to the Blazers. And now you have a guy who's like, well, he's not as good as Rob Williams, but at least he has some of the athleticism, even though he lacks for some of the skill, and it'll be enough. He's a guy who could come off the bench and give you some good minutes. Then you have Jahmi'us Ramsey, an impressive player. And he's a guy who sort of reminded me of a little bit Tobias Harris. They have him listed only at 6'3", and that's for sure. There's no way that's true. I mean, he was definitely taller than 6'3". They have him listed as a point guard. I don't think he's a point guard. I don't know what he did in college, because I didn't follow his college career, but Jahmi'us Ramsey is a guy who can score, and he has polish to his game. He's able to score inside and outside. He is, like I said, I would compare him, when you see him with the headband and the type of way he plays, he reminds you of a Tobias Harris. Now, not to say that when the playoffs come around, this guy's going to vanish, but skill-wise, he's a spot-up shooter. He has pretty good footwork, and he's got that he plays at his pace kind of thing going for him. But he has a little bit of athleticism too, so sort of similar, good comparison to Tobias Harris. That's what I would say. And one of the rules, or I would say the unspoken rules of Summer League, is that as Summer League goes on, the players who have proven themselves, there are some teams that will stop playing them. For example, you had a player who we're going to get to soon, Jaden Springer. He played in the first game. He blew everybody so out of the water. You saw, okay, this guy is where he needs to be for his progression, and he never played another game in Summer League. Neemias Queta played a couple of games, and then that was it. They yanked him. They said, hey, we've seen what we needed to see. There's no point. Let's give other guys their time to shine. And with Jahmi'us Ramsey, he did stop being played. Boston stopped putting him on the court after a bunch of games. So that is is a good thing. That means that they saw the same thing that I was seeing from him. They saw that he was good enough. Then you have where it starts to get dicey with Baylor Shireman. He was not good. He had one game, I think, where he hit 3 threes, and he, for the most part, was streaky. Would be an understatement. He was pretty much bad, and every now and then he would hit a couple. He wasn't great on defense. And ultimately, yeah, look, he's a rookie. So it's very possible that, but he's an older rookie. He's a 23-year-old rookie. So it's possible that in a year from now, he'll do really well in Summer League, and that's what you'd like to see. But this is not a guy has any chance of really making the Celtics roster no matter what. There would be 5 guys ahead of him, even from this G League roster, who should make it over him, at least. Then you have Jaden Springer, who was just unbelievable. He could score inside, outside. He showed that bounce. It's sort of like when you were watching Cam Whitmore step back into Summer League for the Houston Rockets, and you're like, okay, this is ridiculous. He doesn't belong here. He has the bounce. He has the shooting. He has the spring. He has every trick in the book. All the polish, he's got it. Jaden Springer is, no doubt, an NBA player. And if you have one of these teams where you don't have a very good G League program built out, or you are looking for an NBA point guard to take a shot on, or a backup point guard to take a shot on, this is a guy that you may want to try to pry away from Boston, because this is an NBA player, and that's really what you wanted to see, which you saw in the very first game. You saw this guy's better than everyone else by far. There's no question. So, a real NBA talent. Then you come to an interesting guy. He's listed as a center. He's 6'9". He's not a center. His name is Killian Tilly. So, this guy reminded me very much of Nick Batum, a younger Nick Batum, where the guy could stand in the corner and really a sniper from 3 in his younger days. Killian Tilly has the height, 6'9". He's old at this point. He's 26. But if I had to say who on this team has a single skill that is super translatable to the NBA, it's certainly Tilly. Because if you have the guy who knows how to get to his spots without the basketball, like Tilly does, and he gets to his corners, he gets to his wings, and his shot is so reliable. And then he also has the touch on the inside. It's basically, he's a guy who doesn't need the ball, like Nick Batum, but when he gets the ball, he can be very reliable and score it. Again, this is a younger Nick Batum, not necessarily the way that Nick Batum is as an older player where he just vanishes for most of the time, and then here and there he surprises you and scores a bucket. Tilly is a guy who I could see being called up and having an impact actually on a team in the NBA. Then you have another disappointment, Jordan Walsh. He really didn't show anything, maybe up until their last game. He was all over the place. His defense was not everything that it was supposed to be. He's really supposed to be like a Dennis Rodman type rebounder, guy who will run the floor off the rebound, and then a guy who's going to be like sort of that effort glue guy on your team. But the problem is his passing isn't good. And if you're going to be the glue guy, if you're going to be like Draymond Green is the glue guy in Golden State, Draymond Green's passing is phenomenal. And even though his three-point shooting wasn't always amazing, his passing with the team and his directing of the team made him the glue. And like when Bruce Brown was on Denver and they won their finals, he was sort of a glue guy, but he had the passing. He would get the ball at the foul line, he would try to take it in, but then he was able to pass it out where he needed to. When Jordan Walsh tried to do that, he was turning the ball over left and right. Really a complete dud ended up Jordan Walsh. And so what you saw, there's one more player, Anton Watson. Anton Watson was okay. I heard of a certain Boston media outlet talking about how they think he's the most likely to actually make it to the Celtics, real NBA team. I don't think so. I mean, he was okay. He was fine. He had some games where he looked better than others. If you thought that Jermias Ramsey played at his own pace, Anton Watson took that to a whole new level. There were times where he just wasn't guarded and he just took forever and put up the shot, sort of reminding me of slow-mo Kyle Anderson. Not that he really plays too much like him. He's a better shooter than Kyle Anderson, but that wasn't extremely consistent. He had games where he looked better and games where he looked worse, but really nothing to blow you out of the water from Anton Watson. He's going to need to show more if he's actually going to make it anywhere. But what's interesting for the Boston Celtics, as you look through this entire G League roster, is that the guys who you wanted to see more from, their first round pick the last 2 seasons, Jordan Walsh and now Baylor Shireman, were horrible. They weren't good at all. At least not yet. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because once you have these guys on your team, it no longer matters where they were drafted. Unless somebody was taken in the lottery and he's going to get all of that extra push and motivation and he's going to get time, it doesn't matter anymore. So once they're all on the roster, it doesn't matter if the guy who blows you away is Shireman or it doesn't matter if the guy is Jaden Springer. It doesn't matter if Jordan Walsh blows you away or if Jermias Ramsey ends up being the better player. Because once they're on your roster, they're on your roster, and that's just that. So now let's look at the rankings. Who are guys who could actually make it, potentially? Obviously, the number one player for the Celtics in the Summer League, Jaden Springer. He played 1 game, and he showed he's an NBA player. No question. Number 2, it would be Keita. Of course, no question. These are the 2 guys who actually have a shot. At 3, I would say Davison, maybe. Or I would probably put Ramsey and Tilly above Davison because Davison's he's not gonna make it. He's just not gonna make it. Because where would Davison make? He's a point guard, or if you want to say he's not a shooting guard, that's for sure not. So he's a point guard. There's just too many guards on the Boston Celtics. There's just no chance that he could make it to the real team. And he's working behind Springer. Whereas I would say, so Springer 1, Keita 2, I'd say Ramsey 3. Because when a guy is polished offensively, he can play on a team. He can play in the league. Whereas Davison, it's like, what would have to happen for Davison to get a spot in the NBA? You would have to have a team you would have to be on a team like the Wizards or the Hornets, and they would have to just have such a bad season that they had a veteran like Micic on the team, and they're just like, hey, screw this, we're just gonna play Davison and see if he can show us something. Like that would be Davison's path to the NBA. Whereas Ramsey, if he keeps playing polished, good scoring inside and outside, he'll have a shot. A team will take a chance on him. And Killian Tilly, I think he's a guy who could be on an NBA roster because he just has the most translatable skill. He's a guy who's long, who's big. His defense needs work. That's not even a question. But offensively, the guy has really, really good touch from the corners, from outside. And if he gets the ball foul line and in, he can flip it up and in. So I think that he really actually is a solid player. Then I would say Davison. Then Watson. And then, totally off the board, you would have to go for Shireman and Walsh. They would have to show something to even give an inkling that they could ever possibly make an NBA roster. But there you have it. That's Boston. We've done the first team. We've done the NBA champions. Not a team with probably the most interesting summer league, but even on a team like the Celtics who have basically nothing to gain from summer league, even they have something there. Even they have prospects. And when you look at their NBA roster and you think Tatum and Brown, Holiday, Porzingis, Derek White, and then they even extended guys like Pritchard and Hauser. It's going to be hard for anyone to make this team unless there's injuries. The only guy who really, really, really has a shot to make it is probably Keita, because the big man is the thing that they need more because Porzingis is injured. So you have Horford, and then who else do you have? You have Keita. And if you really are desperate for a big man and you think that Tilly could potentially give you some minutes in like the supplemental role to Al Horford, you can try it, but he's probably not going to do enough inside. Maybe he could play with Horford. You play Horford at the 5, and you play Tilly at the 4. And then you have Brown and Tatum and Derek White or Drew Holiday on the floor also. And like that's a way that you could go about it, but It's unlikely. The only guy who really stands a chance, I would say, is Keita, and then Jaden Springer could be the guy who you bring into the game during garbage time. But for the most part, they already have Hauser and they already have Pritchard. So what do you really need Springer for? I think Springer's a guy you maybe look to send elsewhere, do a combo deal, and see if you could improve something. Because I don't know if he'll make it. Basically, I would say Springer was the best player from the summer league, but Keita is the guy who's most likely has a shot of making the NBA team. And then I think Ramsey is a talented player, but Tilly is a guy who his skills just so easily convert to the NBA that I would give him a better shot than Ramsey at making an NBA roster. But Ramsey, probably the better player, is what I would have to say. The disappointments, Shireman and Walsh. We're going to continue this with a very interesting team. We're going to talk about a team who kind of blew everybody away in the last few games of Summer League. That's the New York Knicks. We're going to get that on the next one. Like always, we're your source for a great time every time. And until next time, we are out.